The shuttle punched through the upper atmosphere of Zeta, for with a judder that rattled everyone's teeth. Ice crystals streaked past the observation portholes like tracer rounds, and the temperature gauge ticked steadily downward. Lieutenant Maya Chun leaned forward in her harness, eyes calm, breath slow. She had felt colder in a Canadian winter once, but she didn't tell the others that. Let them think this was unbearable. To her left, the Zoril cadet twitched. Marartak, she recalled, scaled, sun-blooded, and already starting to tremble despite the insulation woven into his uniform. He clicked his inner jaw and muttered something in his native tongue. Likely a curse or a prayer. Maya didn't ask which. Across from her, the Tharn sat bolt upright. Slender, pale, and twitchy, its bulbous eyes never blinked. It kept glancing at the temperature monitor with increasing alarm. Maya could feel its anxiety without any words. The Tharn were weak-bodied but telepathically sensitive, which, Maya had decided early on, must be hell on a survival test. The ship jolted. They had landed. All cadets, prepare for atmospheric exposure in 30 seconds, barked the voice from the overhead comms. You may bring only what is on your person. No shelters. No food units. The exam begins immediately upon exit. The door hissed. Air sucked out. Cold slammed in like a physical wall. Marartak recoiled, and even the Tharn flinched. Maya stepped out without pause. They were in a white desert of serrated ridges and sweeping ice plains, where the sky was a sullen slate gray and the horizon shimmered with sub-zero wind. Snow whipped in horizontal waves. No trees. No visible shelter. Just death in all directions. Maya dropped to one knee and scooped up a handful of snow. Fine powder.
Dry.
Not ideal. Still usable. She turned her head and shouted above the wind. Start moving. You stop, you freeze. The Zoril and Tharn hesitated. Behind them, the gelatinous Jellin cadet oozed out of the transport, already beginning to slow. Its moisture was freezing around its translucent skin. Not good. Maya moved fast, scanning for any natural break, anything that could act as a wind buffer. After 50 meters, she found a slight depression, a drift caught between two jagged ice spires. She dropped her pack and started digging. What are you doing? The Tharn asked, its voice a reedy hum that barely carried. Making a shelter. We must conserve energy, it said. Movement wastes warmth. You know what else wastes warmth? Being dead. She stabbed into the snow with a field knife, carved out a trench, and began packing walls using compressed ice blocks. It wasn't elegant. It didn't have to be. It had to survive the night. The Zoril slumped nearby, limbs twitching. His scales were dulling. Marartak growled, low and long. Heat, he hissed. We must have heat. Then help me build this thing, Maya snapped.
Move.
Use your muscles. You sit still, you're done. Your biology isn't saving you here. He bared his teeth but dragged himself over. He began lifting snow half-heartedly. Maya didn't coddle him. Behind them, the Jellin was collapsing, unable to maintain cohesion. Maya yanked off her emergency blanket and wrapped it around the creature. She didn't know if it would work. She didn't care. It was better than watching it crystallize. The Tharn approached and hovered at the edge of the trench. This is chaos. There should be a coordinated plan. There is, Maya said, not pausing. Stay alive. That is not. She stood, eyes locked with its bulbous gaze. We don't have time to argue philosophy in a blizzard. You want to survive?
Dig. Stack. Move.
Or walk off and freeze trying to feel superior. The Tharn stared for a beat too long. Then, silently, it grabbed a flat shard of ice and began scraping snow toward the trench. By nightfall, the shelter was done. An ice dome with a tunneled entry, layered with bodies and thermal wraps. It was cramped, crude, and wet, but it held the warmth of 5 bodies and kept the wind out. Maya lay against the wall, boots off, drying her socks against her chest. Her fingers ached, and the inside of her gloves were damp with sweat. But they were alive. Outside, the wind howled like some dying god. She could feel the cold seeping into every crack of their icy tomb. The others lay in a half-circle, shivering but quiet. Even the Jellin pulsed faintly beneath its wrap, stabilized for now. And Marartak rasped a breath. "Why do you not panic, human?" Maya looked up. "Because panic doesn't help. And Earth taught us that the environment doesn't care how scared you are. You adapt or you die. That's the rule." The Tharn stirred, eyes fluttering. "You knew how to do this. Did they prepare you more?" Maya gave a tired smile.
No.
"I grew up in Winnipeg." No one laughed, but the silence wasn't quite as sharp after that. They drifted into a shared, fitful sleep. Outside, the storm raged, and the cold thickened. One alien had already stopped responding in another sector, according to the earlier calm burst. Several others were showing signs of frost shock. But Maya's team? They had a roof over their heads, made from ice, sweat, and stubbornness. And they weren't dead yet. The wind never stopped. By the third day, it had settled into a constant, teeth-grinding howl that whistled through cracks and rattled the ice walls. Even inside the human-made shelter, every breath came with a sting. The cold had seeped into bones, dreams, and thoughts. But Maya-chan wasn't interested in comfort. She was focused on endurance. The Jellin cadet, Iril, was shrinking. Literally. Its gelatinous form had lost almost 20% of its mass, moisture sublimating off its surface despite the wraps and insulation. It could barely gurgle now. Maya watched it twitch and ooze faintly by the wall and knew it wouldn't last another day without intervention. She turned to Marartak, who was half awake and clutching a chunk of warming stone she'd buried in the snowpack 2 nights ago. His scales were blistered in places. He looked more like a fossil than a fighter. "We need heat," Maya said flatly. "Real heat. Or Iril is dead by tonight and you're next." "I am strong," Marartak hissed, though it sounded more like a plea than a boast. "You're sun-blooded and dehydrating," she said. "The only thing you're strong at right now is pretending." The Tharn, who had gone silent since the second day, opened its eyes. "There is geothermal instability here," it murmured. "I felt it when we landed. A pulse beneath the crust." Maya's eyes sharpened. "Where?" The Tharn closed its eyes again, reaching outward with whatever sense allowed its people to read thermal vibrations through snow. 1.2 kilometers. That direction. It raised a trembling hand toward the eastern ridge. "Maybe a vent. Or fault." Maya didn't hesitate. "We're going." "You cannot leave the shelter," the Tharn warned. "You'll perish." "I'll die if I stay," she shot back. "I need that heat. We all do." She packed a sled out of scavenged paneling and tied it together with fiber twine stripped from her own suit lining. Supplies were minimal, just an ice axe, a shovel, and the modified sensor from her downed comms unit, which she'd reprogrammed to ping temperature differentials instead of signal strength. And Marartak insisted on coming. She didn't stop him. They left at first light, what passed for light on this cursed planet, a faint blue haze that did nothing to warm skin or spirit. Maya pulled the sled while Marartak trudged behind, grunting through each footfall like it was war. The terrain was worse than it looked. The snow was brittle in some places, powdery in others, hiding crevasses that snapped open without warning. Twice, Maya nearly vanished beneath the surface. Once, Marartak had to drag her back with frozen claws and brute instinct. At 1.1 kilometers, the scanner flickered. Maya dropped to her knees and jammed it into the snow. Readout: minor heat flux. The ground here vibrated faintly, irregularly, like breath from a dying furnace.
She started digging.
It took nearly an hour. Her hands stopped responding to sensation halfway through, but she didn't stop. Neither did Marartak. When they finally cracked through the permafrost and steam hissed up in a whisper, both just stared, stunned by the sheer relief of it. Maya widened the hole, inserted the insulated tubing she'd fashioned from melted water bladders, and routed it back to the sled reservoir. Warmth trickled in. Not much, but enough to keep water liquid.
She grinned.
"Portable heat source," she said through chattering teeth. "It's not elegant, but it's better than dying." On the way back, the wind picked up again. A real storm this time. Visibility dropped to near zero, and they nearly overshot the shelter entirely. Only when Maya slammed face first into her own entrance tunnel did she know they'd made it. Inside, the Tharn blinked slowly. You were not expected to return. Maya ignored the jab and connected the heat tube to the shelter's interior wall, letting warmth seep in. She moved quickly, laying the warmed tubing near Irl's body, watching as the gelatinous creature twitched and began to rehydrate, ever so slightly. And Marartak collapsed, face buried in the ice. He muttered something in his language. It sounded like a thank you, or maybe an apology. No one spoke for several minutes. Then the Tharn said, "You think like no other species I've seen." Maya shrugged. "We adapt. That's what we do." "It's more than that. You act while others hesitate. You risk when others calculate. You will lead." She looked up, eyes shadowed. "I didn't come here to lead. I came here to pass." "But the rest of us wouldn't have," the Tharn replied. Maya didn't respond. She busied herself patching the tunnel wall, reinforcing the roof with a double layer of ice slats. She could still feel the frostbite in her left foot and the ache in her lower spine from hauling that sled, but adrenaline dulled it. Tomorrow, they'd have to improve the shelter again, reinforce the trench, maybe even build out another tunnel for food processing, if they found anything edible. When she finally lay down, it was near the heat line, her body curled tight. Irl pulsed faintly nearby, and Marartak snored in short, ragged bursts. The Tharn was still and silent, like a statue in thought. Outside, the storm clawed and screamed. Inside, a few aliens remained alive, not by luck, not by design, but because a human refused to let them freeze. And Zeta, hadn't seen the last of her. The 9th night was the worst yet. The storm had escalated into something feral, no longer just wind, but a relentless roar that made the ice dome tremble. Snow seeped through even the smallest flaws in the structure, layering the floor with frost despite Maya's constant patchwork. The heat tube hissed intermittently, sputtering like it might die at any moment. She checked it every hour, rubbing her numb fingers over the tubing like a medic monitoring a patient's pulse. And Marartak hadn't woken for 2 shifts. His breathing was shallow, scales cracked and pallid, body curled in on itself like a dying star. Even warmth couldn't push vitality back into his veins anymore, not without real medical intervention. Maya knew what hypothermic organ failure looked like. And this wasn't a battle he could brute force. She kept working anyway. Irl, stabilized and partially recovered, helped reinforce the shelter. The Gellan's form was still half its original mass, but now it moved with some cohesion, manipulating snow with surprisingly precise pseudopods. It even began to hum, a deep, liquid vibration that Maya didn't recognize at first, until she realized it was a song, some kind of survival rhythm, passed down in its species like a cultural heartbeat. The Tharn had stopped trying to rationalize everything 3 days ago. It simply watched now, eyes enormous and unreadable. It followed her with quiet intensity, like studying a new law of physics. "Your body is weaker than MR attacks," it said one evening while Maya was crushing ice blocks into insulation slush. "Yet you remain standing. Why?" She didn't pause. "Because I have people relying on me." "That is not logic. That is compulsion." "No," she said, shoving the slush into a wall crevice. "That's responsibility." The Tharn tilted its head. "My species trains out such instincts. They waste energy in crisis. That's why your people keep freezing to death." It didn't respond. On the 10th day, the emergency beacon activated. It started as a low-frequency ping, crackling through the broken comm unit sheet hot-wired into a battery cell. Maya blinked in disbelief at first. Then her chest tightened with something between relief and dread. A retrieval unit was inbound. ETA, 6 hours. She looked over the shelter, the crude dome of ice and melted snow, the bundled figures within. And Marartak had stirred briefly that morning, enough to croak out Maya's name. The others were holding on but barely. And then the new transmission came in. Survival parameters reevaluated. The voice crackled in through static. Shelter construction indicates unfair human advantage. Final test adjustment. All cadets must relocate to a new designated point within 3 hours. Coordinates attached. Maya froze. The new coordinates were 2 kilometers across open terrain. No wind breaks. No geothermal vents. No natural cover. A death march. Irel's body shimmered in distress. The Tharn looked from the device to Maya. They're trying to equalize results. Or eliminate outliers, Maya muttered. They mean to kill us.
She didn't deny it.
Or see how far I can carry you. The Tharn blinked slowly. You are not obligated. I know, she said. But we're not done yet. She fashioned a sled from the shelter's inner wall, cutting pieces with methodical precision. Irel bundled MRR tack as gently as it could, secreting moisture into the padding to minimize shock. The Tharn gathered the remaining rations, barely enough for the march. They left nothing behind. No trace of the shelter remained when they departed, only a smoothed indentation where ingenuity had defied extinction. The wind was crueler than before. Halfway through the journey, Irel began to slow again. Its limbs lost structure. Maya pulled harder on the sled, teeth clenched so tightly her jaw ached. The Tharn, wrapped in tattered thermal layers, fell behind. Maya doubled back, threw one of its arms over her shoulder, and dragged it forward.
She didn't stop.
Not when the wind knocked her flat. Not when her vision began to tunnel from exhaustion. Not even when the skin on her cheek cracked open from the cold and began to bleed, freezing in rivulets down her jaw. They reached the beacon with 6 minutes to spare. The retrieval vessel hovered like some divine machine, sleek, sterile, untouched by the suffering below. Drones emerged. Scanners swept them. Vitals logged. Status confirmed. Survival complete, a voice said. Maya collapsed beside the sled, unable to speak. The medical officers who emerged were aliens, non-human observers, studying her like she was a specimen. They made no comment on the frostbite in her fingers, the muscle tears in her back, or the blood frozen in her hair. They only asked one question. Why didn't you leave them behind? She looked up, half smiling through cracked lips. Because humans don't leave people behind. That's rule number 1. Later, in the debriefing chamber, she sat wrapped in thermal gel and silence. Her body would heal. MRR tack was already responding to treatment. Irel had stabilized. Even the Tharn had begun writing a report titled Human Behavioral Aberrations in Lethal Conditions. But what mattered most was the simple line in the official evaluation. Human Cadet Maya Chen exceeded all known resilience metrics. Reclassification requested. Note: possible species-wide reevaluation advised. She leaned back, eyes closing, lips curling in the ghost of a grin. Let them reevaluate. Next time, maybe they'd send 2 humans.